All right, let's go ahead and get started. We've got an exciting class today, our much anticipated on-camera workshop. We're very fortunate to have a guest lecturer with us, Alberto Bonilla, an alum of Rutgers, as a matter of fact. MFA from Rutgers School of the Arts, many acting credits, a lot of experience teaching on-camera stuff, a lot of experience teaching other acting stuff, both in academic and studio environments in New York City. We're going to go through this workshop, go over some basics of on-camera stuff, audio-visual basics, lighting basics, angles, some things that will help you for the exercises that we're actually going to do, which are, yeah, I can manage it quickly, that's all right. Which are going to be the video conferencing, the on-camera interviews, the press conferences. Should you find yourself in your company doing a video conference and you want to represent yourself as positively as you can, similarly if you're making an important statement in a press conference or doing an important thing for an interview in a professional setting. So with that, I'm going to go over some of those basics. Alberto's going to chime in a little bit. That'll take maybe about an hour, and then we'll start the exercises after that. We've got some breakout rooms, and we've got a system we've devised. Are you ready? Fantastic. All right, so we'll go over some basics. In general, we'll talk about specifically how to do good video conference, how to do good on-camera interview, how to do good press conference. Then we've got our various exercises. So let's start with some AV basics sound. Now, there's a couple things I want to go over in terms of using a microphone effectively. The first is just starting with the microphone, just starting a speech with the microphone. Have any of you ever noticed sometimes there's this really abrupt intro sound, maybe a tuft of sound, something that scares your audience? All right, there's a couple things I recommend to avoid that intro. If you're making a speech with a big microphone, or if you're doing one of these things, video conference, camera, press conference type thing. One, I call the H technique. The other I call the increasing volume pull technique. The H technique is starting with a word that starts with H. So the letter H, it's a breathy sound. So if you say how, high, Harold, it's different than the hard start, like Priya. That has a P sound. And if you get that wrong, it can be an abrupt thing on, the microphone. So I recommend imagining that there's an H in the start of the word that you are starting with. So if you're going to say, you can do it either way. You can start with a word that starts with H, or you can imagine the H in front of it. So if I'm going to say, how is everyone doing today? I can have that space where I'm using the breath to say H to make sure the volume is right. The other thing I can do is I can adjust the volume of the microphone as I'm getting started. I can start with the microphone a little bit further away from me, and I can pull it towards me as I make sure the sound is adjusted properly. So I can start with the slightly breathy H, lean into it, and pull the microphone towards me as I'm adjusting for volume. Does that make sense? Fantastic. Adjust for body mic. Now sometimes you won't have an actual handheld mic, you'll have a body mic, and you'll just need to listen very carefully and adjust your sound for that. It's a little bit more of a challenge, but you can't actually pull the body mic further away from you. You just have to be very conscious of it. Visible face mouth. So anytime you're doing an on-camera interview, a video conference, you want your audience to see your face and see your mouth. They've done studies to show that if you can see someone's face as they're talking to you, you will see them as more trustworthy. If you can't see someone's face when they're talking to you, you don't connect with them as effectively. And that probably shouldn't be a surprise to you. So you want to make sure that your whole mouth, your whole face is visible on camera. Voice. Slow, natural, engaged. All right, this is not the time to try out your ringside presenter voice. You want to just talk naturally. You also want to talk slowly, and you want to be engaged. Now, I won't do anything in this class. I really don't coach people on how to use an effective vocal technique. I will often just say, be more engaged. Be more excited about what you're saying. use some of the eye contact techniques to connect with your audience. Use those hand gesture techniques that we did in class 2 to bring more physical engagement. And what happens is just a naturally more powerful tone of voice. So I'm not going to teach any fancy techniques when we do on-camera stuff in terms of voice. It's just to remind you to use your natural voice, speak slowly, and be excited to be engaged. Starting and stopping. So when you're starting and stopping using any sort of audio-visual equipment, you want to think about these working the microphone techniques to start. You also want to think about a full sentence minimum. You don't want to use a lot of short words, especially if you're on a video conference that's going back and forth. You say, yes, I agree. Sometimes there's a time delay. Sometimes there's a little chop at the beginning of the sound. Full sentence minimum, and be clear about when you're stopping. It's not the time to ramble on and on, because it confuses your audience even more if it's unclear where you're stopping. Any questions about that stuff? So some things to keep in mind working the microphone. Use your natural voice. Start and stop with a clear focus. Second thing I want to address. Yes, Liv.
How would you do a clear stop?
Just like you did. You had a downward inflection in your voice, a clear stop. No one had any doubt that you were stopping then. If you have a softer upward inflection, maybe I'm going to kind of ramble on. If you can do things facially with your eyes that indicate you're thinking, maybe you're going to say something else. That stuff confuses your audience even more when you add the camera to it. Okay. Next thing I want to just address is where you look. So suppose I'm giving you all a lecture here and there's a camera in the room, and there actually is a camera in the room. So do I look at the camera the whole time? Or do I look at you the whole time? It depends. Depends on the situation, depends on the scenario, depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But what I would point out is that what we'll cover in this workshop is times we always want to be aware of the camera. So if I'm doing a workshop where I look at the participants in the room, I don't want to forget that the purpose of this is so this television audience can see. So I always want to maintain an open stance to the camera. I really don't follow these techniques for recording this class because it's just a little something extra we do for class participation, and so you all can have a record if you do presentations. But if this were something that was important to me to spreading the message online, whatever, I would be more conscious of the camera. So we might want to do eye contact with the studio audience, we might want to do eye contact with the television audience. But in either case, we are aware of the camera. If we're making eye contact with the studio audience, we're showing the television audience what it would be like if they were here. So I'm using good, sincere eye contact with the studio audience and giving our television audience that feeling like, wow, if I were in class, I would be engaged with this person. Now, if I want to speak directly to the television audience, that may be an important choice, in which case I would look directly into the camera. And that can be a little bit weird sometimes. I've thought about this a lot when I'm watching the Republican debates. I guess I watch the Democratic debates too, but it just gets a lot more exciting in the Republican debates because there's a lot of people on stage, there's a lot of bickering back and forth, and then sometimes the candidates, instead of looking at the moderator, instead of looking at the person next to them, they will stare directly into the camera and address the American people. And that's a little bit hard to do if you think about it. So I've got people on stage I'm debating with, I've got a moderator asking me questions, I've got people in the audience who are here, and all of a sudden I'm staring into some weird metal thing. How do I be sincere about that? Let me trade up to Alberto and ask him for techniques about how to connect with the camera, this weird metal thing.
One of the things that when you guys will notice if you ever watch political debates as Zach's talking about is that when somebody's looking directly into the camera, they're not looking into the camera as if it's a machine. They're actually trying to relate to it. Either it's like their best friend, a pet, something that brings about a sincerity. If when a really good politician, for example, Reagan was very good at doing this. Everybody, whenever they saw Reagan, they thought it was like grandpa talking. So, just even if he was saying good news or bad news. Clinton was very good at looking into the camera. You lied about an entire affair right into the camera, and the nation didn't believe it. But it's because one of the things that he did was he committed fully to whatever message he had, or that she has, or whoever is looking into the camera. And it's about clarity of intention as well. You'll notice that when you talk to somebody and you're looking them in the eyes, if they know what they're talking about, there's a clarity that happens in their eyes. And there's a commitment, so then you begin to trust them. You need to know that when you're looking into the camera, to have that exact same kind of clarity. So you need to know your message, whatever your message is. Really believe in your message. Whether it's good news or bad news, whether you're doing a Skype interview and you're telling them about last quarter's loss, or that you're pitching yourself for a job. It really does come across. The other thing that is a technique that is used, it's actually a commercial use. It's called triangulation technique. And what that is let's just say I have a chart or I have an object. And here's the camera. And what I do is that if I'm looking into the camera and I'm talking directly to it, what I do is I first look down to the object I'm going to bring into frame. So I look there, I look down, I bring it into frame while I'm looking at it, and then I look again to the camera. You'll notice that every aspirin commercial that you ever watch for Bayer or anytime they bring an object into frame, what they do is they first, the Coke commercial, they look at it, bring it in here, and then bring it back to you. So it's called triangular technique. It's 1, right? And then it's to 2 to 3. And what that does is it's very jarring visually. If I was to bring something into frame, it's really weird. Even without the frame, you guys are already laughing. But if I was to look at this and then look at you, all of a sudden there becomes a relation to it. So if you're ever bringing any kind of object, say for instance you're doing a presentation, you're trying to bring it into the Skype frame or whatever, don't just pull it out of nowhere. Introduce it with your eyes, and for whatever reason, visually, they trust it more. You want to take lead?
Oh, you can.
So, leading leading the camera is actually something that's done. Let's say if you're walking and they're following you with the camera, or if you're moving with the camera. Sometimes you'll notice that sometimes it's on talk shows, somebody will be talking and then they'll move across. Or if you're doing a presentation and they're videotaping it. What you need to do is you need to actually not move so quickly. You need to almost signal your intent. Do you see how I almost moved like that? You knew I was going to move this way. It is actually to help the camera move with you. Because if I was to suddenly move back or move to the side, I become out of focus. And they've done studies actually where whenever something goes slightly out of focus, for the millisecond that it's happening, people tend to lose trust in whatever the message is. They just lose trust. Because think about your wife. If you can't see something very clearly, immediately your primal instinct is not to trust it.
Yeah, let's just think about that for a minute. So this is technical stuff, and Alberto's a professional in camera stuff, and he has a lot of experience making this stuff work. But if you're doing a Skype call and you go out of focus, we've got this study Alberto mentioned, millisecond where they're going to lose trust. Are they going to think that, gosh, this person must be great at accounting, they just don't understand how to use Skype? Or are they going to think, oh, gosh, this person is just not on top of their game professionally? It's kind of a stilted question the way I ask. Of course, the answer I'm looking for is that if you can't handle your Skype call, then people are going to question your professional ability, at least somewhat. And you want to put your best foot forward, even though this is a medium you may not be used to. All right, so let's talk about lighting. Now this is another interesting one. We could talk forever about the nuances and technical stuff of the lighting, but Alberto and I discussed simplifying it down to a couple of basics. Basics that you all could do as business professionals in terms of how you're going to structure this 3-point lighting for, say, a Skype call. And I'm going to, our Skype video conference, and I'm going to let Alberto explain the 3-point stuff.
Every interview you see on 2020 or Nightline or even anything that you're going to see on the news uses the same basic lighting, and it's called 3-point lighting. And it's very simple. It just means there are 3 points of light. There is a backlight that either is called a crown light that can be either hitting the subject from the back of the head. So sometimes watching an interview, you'll notice like their hair is a little bit glowing, right? Or it'll hit the background just to define the background, what's behind it. You've got what's called a key light and a fill light. The key light is normally the stronger light. The fill light is to fill in shadows from the one light. Next slide. So this is somebody sitting in a room with no lighting. Now obviously if they were to have a conference call or be interviewed or whatever, your immediate impressions of this are negative. Or it seems unprofessional, or it just seems low. So if we go to the key light, you'll notice that now the subject is really clear, it's more defined, but we have this harsh shadow here, which is very dramatic. I don't know if you want to do your quarterly reports like that, that might not be a good idea. And then the background is kind of blown out, we're not quite sure. He's almost floating in space or something. So then when we get the fill light, what it also does is that it also begins to take a little bit of shape here. Now you could even it with both of them. In this picture we have this one a little bit less, but you'll notice that now they become a three-dimensional object. I tell people, and when I coach politicians, when I coach actors, that if you cross the camera with your face, they have done studies again, that if people only see one side of your face in an entire conversation, they think of you as one-dimensional. But if they see both sides, they think of you as a three-dimensional person, as if you have depth, right? So now he looks like he has a little more depth, however the background isn't quite filled out. So then we get finally the backlight, the key light, and the fill light. Now you'll notice this looks really professional. This looks like it's done. If you were interviewing this person, it would be very interesting. That's why you always see on 2020 or Nightline, whatever, you'll see maybe a lamp in the background that's lit. That's not just for atmosphere. It's actually to define the space in the interview. This is very easy to accomplish.
Just 3 lights, so 3 lamps sitting on your desk can give you this for 2020 look, right?
And you could also even, for instance, let's just say you have a window and you have 2 lights. If you're doing a day conference, what you can do is you make this your main light, get a little lamp over here with a daylight light bulb, because you don't want to mix it or else you're going to get blue and yellow. Make sure it's a daylight. You put it here, and a real easy thing to do, guys, and I do this when I coach people who are in London or Los Angeles, you just need to put something white over it. You can take a bed sheet. Don't put it on it because you'll start a fire, but put it in the front. Or even just, if some lamps have a really nice lampshade, and it diffuses the light, and then get one more light in the background or put a lamp. And now you can do it with 2 lights. Light here, light in the background, and then all of a sudden you're going to look much more presentable, and that's just on a Skype call.
My question is actually in regards to the comment that you made about the side of your face and how it comes off as being one-dimensional.
Yes.
So let's say you're like I've been in, at work and there's been like conferences with multiple people, right? So it's like a team and we're presenting a teleconference to another team. So there's like 3 or 4 of us on camera.
Mm-hmm.
What is your suggestion to not, now I'm wondering, does it make sense to look at the other team members, or do you forward, or?
I would suggest yes, because one of the things that happens is when you're engaged, if Zach is up here with me, let's say we're doing a conference call, and the camera's here, and I stay like this the entire time, and he's only seeing that side of the face the entire time, and just a Skype conference call, it's not going to be, there's no reason why I can't come over here, even if it's just to get my coffee, even if it's just to move my thing over, just by them visually seeing both sides. Does that make sense? So of course I would give my attention to Zach when he's talking, and then when I would talk forward, he would give attention to me. That would actually cause, that's actually triangular technique.
And then I would back up and see what he has to do, right?
Oh. Don't want to get up there. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. So I understood correctly. You're saying, yes, look at the person who you're speaking, but make attempts to like look the other way. So
You can. And it's not like you're consciously making an attempt to look the other way, because then they're going to think you're weird. You can put your water over there. Simply go to grab your water. It's a visual thing that we do. You would feel really odd if I spoke to you like this the entire time. Never looking at this side. Do you understand? You just do. You would be like, what's wrong with that? In the same way.
You just figure it out, and Alberto and I were joking about that, but let me actually show you that technique. It's a technique actors do a lot of the time. I forget what it's called. Maybe Alberto will remind it. So if we're doing a scene and I step back, look what Alberto would do if he weren't a really smart actor. He would turn and look at me, and we would do the whole scene like this. My face would be in the camera the whole time. The casting directors would remember me because they would just see out the back of Alberto's head. You think actors are really nice people? They're not. They do this all the time. But what Alberto would do, because he's smart, is he'll position himself like this. He'll grab a coffee so you can see the multiple.
I might even come over here, and just to open it up. It's a matter of, you do these things naturally in social situations, is what the reality is. When you're talking with a group of friends around at a bar or at a restaurant, you naturally make sure that everybody does. But as soon as you get under a stress of an interview or something in you clicks and you become hyper-aware, and it actually takes away from you. That's why when Zach talks about be on message, know what you're doing, that actually grounds you so that you can actually subconsciously just do this. You do this in real life. It's just when all of a sudden the camera and the lights are on, people get like a deer in the headlights.
Okay, so what do we got? Am I going? Oh yeah. So why don't you finish up this, and then we'll go on to some.
Right. So you want to make sure that you try to avoid glare, and what glare means in the sense that either the light is hitting the lens or your laptop, which will cause like a flare. I don't know if you have, sometimes somebody's talking in there, and all of a sudden it's like it's not quite wet. A wash, sometimes if the backlight is too bright, the person on Skype or whatever, they'll get really dark. So you have to make sure to go ahead and double check that. And you don't want to just be like this black silhouette speaking with this voice, because then it's very X-Files, really weird. So what you want to do is you want to practice. You want to just check it out. If you know you're going to have a big conversation or conference call or something, set up your lighting, try it. Call your mom, say, Mom, how do I look right now? Whatever, in that sense. And you want to make sure that your backgrounds are not distracting. So for instance, you wouldn't want to have this as your background because it's going to light too much, and if they're looking at your background because it's more interesting than you, then you're going to have a problem here. So obviously, this is an example of a bad background, even though he looks rather dashing there. And this is, what was it that you said?
This is really cool if you're James Bond, not so good if you're Joe from accounting. All right. This is just a wardrobe choice. So he's wearing black and he just blends into the back. He's captured by the background. And you become this joke. You know, the people in Cleveland will always know you as the person who wore the same thing as the red, the red wall behind you. Like, oh, I remember you. You were the guy who was just the talking head in the red wall. All right. So what do you wear? You wear something that makes you feel the part. If you're an accountant, just think about being conscious of representing yourself like someone who is interviewing for an accounting or finance position, but also feel comfortable. You want to be yourself on camera. You want to be natural and you want to be engaged. So I think it's just a matter of balancing those two things, not using dizzy patterns. Solid colors, which I think I have at a later point. I forget why. Here it is. Solid colors. Dizzy pattern stance. So if I were doing an on-camera interview, I think actually both Alberto and I would have some distracting things going on. Let's see. Yanan has a pretty good solid color jacket. And what else do we got? Who has good? Oh, I think Josh has a good look. Would that be too light, do you think, for you?
It would depend on your background. If you're in front of a darker background, then you're going to really pop in that sense. If you're in front of a white background, that might not work as well.
Okay. Okay. So solid colors. I know you might have a fun blouse or shirt that has some stripes on it that you really like. That makes you feel like a finance person, but just wear something that's solid. Okay. Couple examples. You see a little dizzy pattern. Dancing. If you like men in plaid. Alright, so we've got a little turn. The lines can be very distracting. If we were to see this or have a conference call with this guy, maybe you'd like to have a conference call with this guy, but you'd be distracted by the plaid. Alright, so that is some color and some sound and some whatever we just said, lighting. Now let's talk about angles. Essentially where you put the camera. So where you position the camera for the Skype call, if you're in an interview, where you want to encourage the people interviewing you to put the camera. Essentially, you want the camera at eye level, 90 degrees. So I guess 90 degrees if you're one part of the axes. You want the camera straight in front, so that the audience can see your eyes and at a straight angle. A couple bad things can happen if the camera is below you or above you. If the camera is below you looking up, it creates what I would call a heavy top. It looks like a very authoritative person. Your television audience is looking up your nose, your very big nose, because of the angle of the camera. And it's awkward. If the camera is above you, it gives a submissive look. I call it a mischievous bottom. So let's look at some examples and see how we like these angles. Last thing I'll mention is big foreground. Does anyone know what I mean by that? So I'm in the background here of the camera. Between me and the camera is the foreground, and there's a big foreground as far as the camera is concerned. Does anyone know? Can anyone tell me about that? Essentially what happens is things in the foreground look big. So if I like stick my hand in the camera, it looks like a huge hand compared to my small body. So you want to be aware of that and not create any awkward angles with that. Camera assault. Move your hand, it's going to look like you're assaulting the camera with some huge palm. And the last thing I'll mention is think about separating participants on, say, a Skype call. Sit in a way where you can see your full body. Don't be behind someone they're going to think you're half of a professional. You're someone who's not important to the team. We can't see the whole person. All right, check it out. What kind of angle is going on in this? What sort of effect does it have on our interpretation of this person? Heavy top. So we've got a camera coming down at a lower angle. Now this is a classic shot. Has anyone seen this before? All right, famous portrayal of Citizen Kane, the great New York Times journalist tycoon who thought he ruled the world. And so we've got a classic picture of him looking up at him, being the authoritative person telling the rest of the world how it is. So, gives us kind of, we don't necessarily want to take pointers from that guy type of feel.
This is a very common thing that happens with your laptops, because if you notice, when your laptop is low, hear me out, when it's low, and if it's here, if you end up angling it because you're trying to do a glare, then it's going to come up at you. You're going to get this effect with your laptop, because normally the camera's right there. Or if you're putting a camera on your desk.
Let me point out something else. Look at the eyes here, and compare the eyes with this picture here. Can anyone tell me what's going on with the different angles we're seeing this person versus this person? Yes, yeah.
I think for the person in the background, if the person is right here, the camera is actually here, like that. Like the person is kind of looking up to the camera.
This person's looking up to the camera?
The person in the back, yes.
Okay.
And the person's like standing here waving. The camera is probably somewhere below.
Yeah, so the camera's below here. This is pretty much a straight-on shot, right?
Oh, okay.
That's what it is. It's a straight-on shot. And because he's pointing to a big poster of himself, you can't alter the angle of the picture that's already taken. But notice on this one, we have a full view of his eyes. Even though it's bigger, I think you'll still see where I'm going with this. We have a full view of his eyes, and he draws us in a little bit more. Here, we have a different angle of his eyes. We see a little bit of a slanty eye looking at us, like he's looking down at us. So 90-degree angle here better. Heavy top, not so good. All right, check this angle out. What's going on there?
It seems like it's from the top down.
It's from the top down, mischievous bottom. So question for y'all. What do you do if you see these two guys walk into your house? Doesn't matter, you're already dead. It's too late. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said call the police.
Call the police. All right, it's too late. It's too late, you're already dead. So something's going on. And the filmmaker created that eerie feeling with this angle looking down at them like they're up to something, and gave us a less view of their eyes.
It seems like a security camera.
Okay. Security camera look. So you don't want to look like the person who's being seen on the security camera.
The airport people checking back.
Yeah. All right, excellent. So how about this one? Second.
Yeah, it seems like she wants to become a ghost or something.
Wants to become a host?
Ghost.
A ghost. Okay. Like she wants to
Or
sort of
something like,
disappear?
yeah, she like looks very fiery or something. She's shooting for a horror movie.
Okay, good, good. Natalie?
Kind of meek.
Meek. Yes, she's meek. So, Natalie, if this person applied to you for a job, what might you be hiring her for? Probably not director of marketing, not director of sales, maybe admin. All right. Gives us that meek feeling. So if you're doing an interview where you're supposed to be an authority on your company, you don't want to be at a submissive, meek angle. This one, I'll just tell you where I was going with this. This is a slightly higher angle, but it's very slight. Now, this person is not as extreme as the one before, but it still looks like the individual here is up to something. Maybe they're making a call that's going to get you fired, or worse, who knows. It's a slightly higher angle that gives her just kind of a something's going on that's weird there, I feel. It's taken by someone who obviously didn't like Rick Santorum. A couple things going on. Yeah, but tell us what's going on.
The hand was used to like the big forehead.
Big foreground
Yeah.
camera assault. Oh my God. What about the angle? It's given the heavy top looks from the bottom. So yeah, we don't want to vote for that guy just based on that picture. But this is video conference. There's some good things going on. Suppose we were talking to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. Some good things going on, some things that they could do better in this shot. Break it down for us. There.
The guy standing doesn't seem like he's engaged.
Okay.
Looks like he's just looking.
But he's standing up. He's like has an engaged posture. But he's not conscious of how he's looking to the camera because he's off the screen. Helen.
I think we can put the camera a little bit further in order to cover all of the 6 people.
Yeah, we want all four. We want like check out this person. We have a full shot of her. Right? She has her business stuff together. You might be more inclined to listen to her than say this person who's just hidden behind someone, or this person who's off camera and doesn't really realize it, or this person probably didn't even realize there was a person standing there. Oh, that's the intern, Joe. I forgot about you.
I guess the lighting is also a little weird. You can see that some people have glare on their face and some not. So maybe, the lighting is a little off too.
Yeah, what do you think? Alberto, did you see a little glare, a little not?
Yeah, what I would say is probably the thing that for me stands out most on this, if I was shooting this and coaching this, is that the team does not seem cohesive. You may think
he goes
that,
right to the team cohesion just based on the picture.
because if I was to just analyze it from a visual point of view, I would say that he's the boss, but he's not very together with his team. He tends to stand above them. She's probably the most hard worker, clear of them all, and I would give that guy over there in the end probably the guy that's the most slacker. And these two people will probably vote the same every time on everything because they're blending into one. So if you're going to interview and you say, oh, you're making assumptions on that, but that's all subconscious. It's all subconscious behavior that you as a human being take on regardless if you're really aware of it. So to fix this, I would have everybody sitting there, if he is the leader, have him sit at the same level with his team, spread out, everybody lit the same. They can wear whatever they want, but then if I get onto a conference, now it's a unified front. Do you understand? Now it's a company that's all together with one, as opposed to a bunch of people that look like they're, hey, we're hanging out. Does that make sense?
All right, awesome. All right, so let's move on then to, we've gone through some basics. Now we're going to talk about, after I answer Levy's question, we're going to talk about video conferencing, camera interviews, and press conference, specifically what to do for those. So that
Maybe you're going to cover it in what you talk about what distance should the country from you. And I suppose it's different rules for the settings, but you cover that.
For video conferencing?
Well,
There is a phenomenon that happens you'll see it visually, that the closer you are to the camera screen, the more it looks like you're not looking at the person. Does that make sense? So you ever notice that sometimes you're Skyping and you're doing the eye dance between looking at the camera but looking at the person, but if you're looking at yourself in the screen or the person in the screen, it looks like you're not looking at the person? That has to do with the fact that you're too close to the actual camera, as opposed to taking a step back just a little bit further, and then when you're looking right down at the person, it looks as if you are looking into the camera. So that will help you even engage more with your conference. So you have to check, it's really about checking your camera, because each camera is set up differently. It's to just see. And a nice thing to do with Skype is you can just record, and then just see when does, okay, that's the distance right there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so and that's for video conferencing. We'll talk a little bit more about that in depth right now. For press conferences and on-camera interviews, you really don't have a choice. It's however the camera people set it up. The thing you might have some sway on is where they put the camera. If they put the camera down on the floor, you might say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm calling my agent. Can you put it where you're looking at me straight on, kind of thing. Or get the PR person down there to complain and get them to change it from wherever it is. All right, so video conference, eye contact, just as Alberto was saying. So there's this interesting thing that happens when you're on Skype with someone or doing a video conference where you're looking at them in your monitor, but you're not looking into the camera. Does that make sense? So the person watching you sees a screen of you looking off to the side.
I always just look at myself.
Okay, so you're looking at yourself, and the person watching you sees your eyes off to the side. And you lose some effectiveness because of that. Sometimes it's unavoidable, you do the best you can, but when possible, you want to look your audience in the eye. Suppose if one of the presidential candidates was talking directly to the audience, or the television audience, and tried looking in the camera, but was just off slightly. So you're like, this person's trying to tell me about making America great, but they're looking off to the side. You can lose some power. So how do you resolve that? I'll give you one way. You look directly into the camera. Now it's weird because you can't look at yourself. It's harder to look down at your notes, but what is your audience seeing? They're seeing you connect directly with them for eye contact. So step one, do your best to look directly into the camera. Step two is what Alberto mentioned. Suppose I've got the laptop here and I'm Skyping. Okay, so the camera is up here and then I'm looking at myself down on the screen. So there's a big difference when I'm really close. But suppose I'm way back here and I put a little zoom effect. So the difference between my eye going down a little bit to look at myself and maybe check my notes and see the other person and looking up at the actual camera is slight. So you can use the, what do we call this, a distance plus zoom option. So one, look into the camera as much as you can. Two, use the distance plus zoom option. Another thing, any questions on that? Yes, Jared.
I had an instance where I had to record my interview. And
record your interview?
Yeah, they record it and then
send it to
it's a system, and then they ask like
they ask you a question, so you're like reading your own questions?
They ask like why like this company, and then you have to give a response, and then you record it.
Okay, fair enough.
And then the thing was like, I think when I looked into it, I think I looked slightly off center because my notes were on the very top of the monitor. So I don't know if it's my eyes are off. I thought that they were, but I'm not sure if my eyes were off because I was looking at this like a little below the camera.
Okay, so you're saying I love this company because of X, Y, Z, but your eyes are just off a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that it would have been more powerful if you were looking directly into someone's eyes when you tell them how much you want to work for them, how much you love their company.
You look directly into the camera?
Yeah, but it's tough. You got your notes,
yeah.
You got your other things that are distracting you, so you do the best you can. You rehearse, you maybe have some short notes, just a few words that remind you where you are, so you can look, oh, remind me where I am, and then look back into the camera and use some of the things Alberto talked about by thinking of the camera as your pet, as an actual person rather than a weird metal object. Okay. Understated body language. What do I mean by this in a conference call? A video conference, excuse me. I keep saying conference call, I'm sorry. Video conference, understated body language. What do I mean by that? Vanessa?
What came to mind when you said it was a lot of times when you do video conferences, you tend to like put your arms underneath the table of things, so you miss opportunities to sort of punctuate what you're trying to say. So like I'm a person who talks a lot with my hands, but for whatever reason, whenever I'm on video conference, I like put them down because I feel like I'm doing that.
Okay, yes, so that's one thing. You use less opportunity to communicate something with your hands. But what I want to suggest is even when you try to, your audience doesn't get it the same way. Because a video conference might be those 6 people we showed earlier. If each one of them is trying to do a little nuance with their hands, the folks in Cleveland who are watching, they don't get it. They don't say, oh, Sally was really passionate about that point. I could tell by the way she pumped her fist, because in her screen, monitor screen, it was just a tiny piece. Has anyone ever had that experience when you're on a video conference where everyone in the room just uses their body language to agree? Yeah, we don't like this proposal. We don't like this. And it's clear to everyone who's there, but it's not clear to the people who are at the other end of the conference, because it's understated. They just can't see it the same way. Be aware of it. Don't rely on body language. Time delays. Maybe you've had a 2-second time delay. You want to understand that you're up against that. Handle that by using full sentences. Don't just say yes, and then have everyone laugh at you when they just hear a yes when they're already on to something else. And realize that it's not a quick back and forth. This is a make a statement, hear a response. Digest that, make your response. This is not a, what do you think? Do you know, well, this, yes, no. It's not a quick back and forth. Realize you're up against that. Josh?
Just going back to the understated body language, are there, I guess for lack of a better way, just more overt things that you can do to emphasize points, you know, as opposed to kind of the smaller gestures that are lost?
Sure, let's talk about them together. My first thought when you say that is there are things you might want to be careful of, because you don't want to make a camera assault, you don't want to get closer or do something that everyone on the other end of the video conference laughs. I would say about being clear with language. We'll talk about an agenda, we'll talk about preview, review, overview techniques to just be clear about what you're saying. So we have all decided in Portland that we do not like this new manufacturing plant idea. And we want to get your feedback on it, instead of just, well, we're so-so about the idea and everyone just kind of using their body language to think that that's what you do there. And we'll keep that question in mind as we go through some of the exercises, see what works and what doesn't work. Time delays, visual aids. All right, so we've got some folks who are going to show us a visual diagram later. Levy and Jianing. It's going to be tough. It's actually the map, the little statistical graph you have in your hand. So imagine trying to explain that to someone over video conference. You need to understand what you're up against. Really just have a clear system. And not try to do something awkward by saying, all right, look here. You might say, oh. Have a clear verbal way to explain where you are. Maybe you can email folks materials ahead of time with categories. You might have section E, section B, section C. Say, if I could direct your attention now to section B, or if I could direct your attention now to the loss statement on the graph, just be clear about how you're going to compensate verbally for what's going to be a little bit difficult visually. Monotony and isolation. What I mean by this is you're here in the New Jersey office, you've got the folks in Cleveland who feel isolated and bored because they're just staring at a screen with 6, 10 people. They're not able to read your body languages effectively. They're just hearing the same tone of voice. So they don't feel as connected. They may zone out. What can you do to engage them a little bit more? What do you think? Maybe you can do some of the stuff Alberto mentioned in terms of grabbing a coffee. So I'm going to talk from a slightly different angle. I've been talking at you like this for 20 minutes. Now I'm going to talk to you like this. Maybe I'm going to adjust my seat. maybe I'm going to rotate participants. So Joe from accounting is going to sit just a little bit closer to the camera because now he's going to talk to you about this or that. You could also ask them questions so they don't just sit there for an hour without a back and forth engagement. So it feels like, it might feel like they're just watching a movie and they just zone out. They start sending each other little text messages, or they start throwing paper at each other, and they think you forgot about them. So you can actually ask. So Natalie, what do you think of disadvantage 2? You could also check in with the participants very quickly. I used to take roll on video conferences when I was working in the corporate world, and sometimes it would surprise folks. I would say, so Bob is, or it wasn't a video conference, this was actually conference calls, so it's a little bit different, but it had the same effect. I would go through the roll. I would ask the manager in Cleveland, is Sally there, is Joe there, is Bob there? And the manager would be like, well, she's coming, I don't know. It just sort of caught him off guard. He didn't realize anyone cared who was on the other end of this phone. And when you show people that you do care who's on the other end of the call or the other end of the video conference, they don't feel as isolated. Okay. Overview system. So you want to be clear about where you are. Because you don't have those visual cues that Josh and I were talking about, clarify some of the things that are going on. Have an agenda beforehand that folks can follow along with. Preview. Now we're going to talk about the manufacturing idea in Toledo. All right, now we're talking about the details of the manufacturing plant in Toledo, but let's think about where this fits in with our whole agenda, a 30,000-foot view. And then when you get done talking about it, let's review. Use some of these simple techniques so people don't get lost in this conference call. Keep saying conference call. Lost in this video conference. Okay. What else we got? On-camera interviews. Okay. So we're moving on now to an on-camera interview. So you're going to be interviewed. There's an interviewer. First thing I want to discuss is what I call this one-way, two-way conversation. What I mean by that is you're having a conversation with an interviewer who's asking you questions. But really, there's only one important conversation. It's a one-way conversation between you and the television audience. So it's deceiving. You feel like you're talking to a person, but you need to prepare it, package it, market it, sell it in a way where you're just talking to a television audience. And you want to realize what angles you need to be at, what things you need to say, what sort of nonverbal things you need to possibly not respond to. Sometimes an interviewer might do things to ruffle you, frustrate you, and you can think about just not responding to that. Because I'm having a conversation with the American public. It's not about you asking me nasty questions. If I respond to the fact that I think you're asking me a nasty question, then all of a sudden I've corrupted my one-way conversation with the American public. Does that make sense? You're the one who brought that into your conversation with the American public by letting the interviewer influence you if they got negative. So even though you're having what we think of as a normal two-way conversation, always consider that your one-way conversation is what's important. Clothing, I mentioned feel the part with overview clothing. You want to be comfortable to an extent, but you'll see when we get into the camera interviews that there's really just no being completely comfortable. You're at this weird, awkward angle, and you need to find a way to be yourself and have that one-way conversation with these lights shining down on you, with your head tilted, with a suit that you may or may not normally wear. So feel the part, be as comfortable as you can, but realize it's not going to be perfect. Posture. So avoid slouching, upright and forward. And Alberto was explaining to me this concept of the camera not registering depth. So makes it look, when you slouch, it makes it look even worse.
If you ever notice on films when they're shooting anything, the camera, the reason why people say, oh, the camera adds pounds, or the camera does that, the camera actually doesn't do that. What it is that the camera does not understand depth of field. So whenever you light something, they light it to create depth. That's why when we do the three-point lighting, it's not that the guy was up against the wall or too far from the wall. You couldn't tell. In that previous photo, do you remember the photo with the guy when we were doing the three-point lighting? You have to define the space behind. In the same way, what happens with your face and with your shoulder and your body. So, if I'm talking to you like this in person makes you feel like I'm really engaged with you, as if I'm really connected to you. However, on camera, the reason why you here can see me, because you're seeing me as a three-dimensional, because you're actually like a predator. You have two cameras right here, side by side, which create depth. The camera's a single lens. So if I was to talk to you like this, what it would look like on camera, it would look as if I'm really slouched, as opposed to really engaged. Do you understand that? Because the depth is not created. So it's very important that whatever posture you take in front of the camera is relaxed, upright, comfortable, more importantly, representative of you. Because if I talk to you like this simply looks like I'm very emphatic. On camera, this would look like. Do you understand that? Because the camera doesn't understand depth.
Good. Lack depth perception. Now, overstated body language. Now remember video conferencing, I said understated body language? Because you have a picture with 10 or so people in it and everyone is very small. With an on-camera interview, you have overstated body language. Let me have Alberto tell you a little bit about this. Truth times 10 and close-up moments that we see on camera.
Most of the reason why you're so affected by the movies, you ever go, in your movies you go watch and all of a sudden you walk out and you're completely, oh my God, that was amazing, and what have you, is because most of the time we live our life in what's considered 16 by 9. If you were to take your hands like this and do peripheral vision, do this right now. Take your hands, do this, don't bump anybody, and then just go to your peripheral. Then do the same here and go right above here. You essentially made 16 by 9. So when you're in a conference call with somebody, and you are basically, it's as if you are sitting next to them. So what the camera does is it mimics that. So while there's a camera, the camera could be there, but if it's zoomed up to me in a close-up, anything I do is multiplied by 10. It's as if, you have to think of, that the person you're talking to is standing right there next to you, as if they were in a close-up. So if you widen your eyes really big, it's going to look 10 times more. Does that make sense? So in Skype or interviews, the reason why they always do it in a close-up is because it gives an intimacy to you and the audience. So if you're at home watching the presidential, whenever they're interviewing with Barbara Walters or whoever, and it's close up, it feels like they're talking with you. It's the same thing. It's the same principle that you in your life, probably the most important moments of your life, you've lived in what's considered a close-up, that it was right here. So you just need to take that into account, that even though the interviewer may be this far away, the audience is actually as if they are right here.
Yeah, I like the way you summed that. So the audience is right here. So that one-way conversation with your audience, don't forget that they're right in your face. And they're seeing the nuances in your face. And you want to sincerely connect with them based on that. Vertical, in terms of where you want the camera, we talked about the 90-degree rule. So you want the camera at eye level with you. And if it's not, call your agent. Or say, hey, can we get the camera a little bit down there? Yada, yada. Horizontally, in terms of where we want the camera, or in terms of where we want our eye contacts to be. We want to be looking into the camera as much as possible, or as close as possible. So suppose I'm being interviewed right here. Sagnik is interviewing me, and the camera is right here. I ideally want to be looking as close to the camera as possible. So I might even look directly here. Now, that's a little weird, right? Sagnik's asking me questions, and I'm staring right here. The reason I'm doing that is because I want my eye contact, I want the audience to see more of my eyes. But in this two-way conversation, it's going to feel a little stilted. So, two ways you can get your eye contact as close to the camera as possible in terms of the horizontal level. one, encourage them to put the camera closer to segment, or two, use the technique I just mentioned where I look a little bit to the right of segment. Does that make sense?
Midway between audience.
Yeah. So the camera's right here, you're interviewing me, I might just look right here and answer, like, ask me a question. Go ahead, ask me a question.
How do you feel about our class?
All right, your class is great. I love your class. You bring so much professionalism, yada yada, to the class. So I'm answering this question by looking at it here. It's a technique that brings me closer to my audience, but we just have to understand we're using a medium that may feel a little awkward.
In the movies, they call it eyeline. What will happen is, let's say for whatever reason, they're shooting a scene, and either the star has to go away, or what they want in the background, they have to have the camera here, and the actor cannot be here. So what they'll do is they'll take a piece of tape, like the highlight tape, and they'll mark an X, and they'll say, give me an eyeline, and they'll put the X right there, and so the person, you know, how he was doing, he's talking directly to a piece of tape as an X, even though on camera, when they cut it together, or even if it's an interview, it looks like they're really talking to a real person.
Imagine, you're talking to a piece of tape that's an X, but that's the way to create a better one-way conversation with the television audience. We need to learn some of these games to play. All right, let's talk about what you're going to say during an interview. I suggest you think about your key messages before you go into this interview, and then further, think about how those are going to fit into sound bites. What is a sound bite? Vanessa.
It's like a short blurb of information that captures like the essence of what the person was saying.
Short blurb of information captures the essence, so-called a soundbite, because television statements will often play that short blurb. When you're giving an interview in 2020 is advertising for this interview, say, see what the CEO of this company said about their new technology. They'll play a little soundbite. So you want to think about what is that short little blurb that might be pulled out of context, and how can I fit my key message into that soundbite? And to take it a step further, think about the questions you're going to be asked in advance. What are the common questions? How can you answer those questions in a way that indicate your key messages? And how can you condense those down further to sound bites that the television networks are going to say, yeah, let's play that 5 seconds or that 10 seconds. Preparation you can do in advance to think about how what you're going to say fits into the on-camera meeting. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, has this great quote where he says, does anyone here have any questions for my answers? So he knows what he's going to say before he begins the press conference on national security back in the 60s or the 70s. He just wants someone to ask him a question so he can say whatever he wants. You don't have to be that extreme, but that's essentially what you're doing when you think about what they're probably going to ask you and how you're going to fit your key message into a soundbite for your answer. So you'll come to the interview. You come to the interview with your soundbites ready based on common questions. Next thing I want to ask is, or cover is if you get positive or negative questions on during either an interview or during a press conference. The general rule is if you get a positive question, reiterate that question as you begin your answer. So if Vanessa asks me, tell me about how your new product has been so wildly successful. Right, so Vanessa asked why we've had so much success with our new phone. The reason we've had success is the marketing and the security features and yada, yada, yada. Right, now Priya, on the other hand, asked me, why is your company going into bankruptcy? I said, okay, so I don't want to reiterate that. I don't want to say, so Priya asked why we're going into bankruptcy. Let me tell you, I want to use a technique called blocking and bridging. So I want to block by somehow responding to her question and bridging to something that I want to talk about. So Priya asked me why my company is going into bankruptcy. I'm going to answer this question the following way. So yes, we've had some challenges. And those challenges have entitled us or given us an opportunity to look at new product lines, and that is exactly what we're doing with our massively successful new phone.
So I block just by responding somehow, not by reiterating, but allowing me to bridge to something positive.